Thank you, Mr. President, and allow me to.
The United Nations officials have warned of increased starvation and the threat of further violence in Tigray despite a unilateral ceasefire declared by the Ethiopian government last week.
In recent months, the Council has been briefed and discussed the situation in Tigray privately a half dozen times. We've heard from NGOs and UN agencies about vast displacements, countless human rights abuses, hundreds of thousands of people facing famine, the bombing of civilians, the killing and intimidation of humanitarian workers, the systematic rape of women and girls, and unspeakable acts of sexual violence, the purposeful obstruction of humanitarian aid, the deliberate destruction of UN communications equipment. Tragically, these stories remain pervasive. As Oja told us recently, tragedies of historic proportions are taking place in Tigray, and that's why we called for this meeting today.
Throughout the last months, when division and violence has been experienced in Tigray, we have argued for expanded and robust humanitarian access. We have welcomed the government's resourcing of a significant proportion of the humanitarian needs in Tigray. We have urged the international humanitarian community to move with speed and scale up assistance. We have applauded it and also been disappointed by the continuing shortfalls in its response. We call again for all states, international institutions, organizations, and individuals of goodwill to redouble their efforts in Tigray.
Today is an important opportunity. It is right that this Security Council considers how to help end this devastating conflict and support all of the people of Ethiopia. I shall not repeat the picture of suffering outlined by our briefers. It is stark, it is real. But after 8 months of this conflict, we remain deeply concerned by all that we have heard and that we are seeing. Instead, I want to make 3 brief points on the immediate humanitarian situation, the need for conflict resolution, and in addressing human rights concerns, so that Ethiopia can move on from this most tragic of conflicts.
This meeting is called at a time when the government of Ethiopia took bold measures and political decisions to meet the needs and well-being of its people affected by the law enforcement operation in Tigray. This measure should have encouraged our friends to give support and de-escalate the unhelpful pressure. Equally, we wish to express our appreciation to all of you for recognizing our resolve for peace behind this difficult initiative we have taken. Mr. President, since the Council held the informal interactive dialogue on the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia, there are critical developments that deserve your recognition and constructive outlook. On 28 June 2021, the government of Ethiopia decided to cease the active military engagement of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces in the Tigray region. This decision for humanitarian ceasefire was reached after a concerted deliberation with various stakeholders and partners. We hope that this magnanimous and far-sighted decision will not be wasted by the irresponsible conduct of the TPLF group, which the government of Ethiopia opted to tolerate for the sake of the people of Tigray and to elevate the humanitarian situation in the region.
I'm deeply alarmed by the destruction of the Tekeze River Bridge.
Acting Humanitarian Coordinator of the United Nations Ramesh Rajasingham informed the United Nations Security Council that more than 400,000 people are estimated to have crossed this threshold into famine, and another 1.8 million people are on the brink of starvation.
We have repeatedly said that the only way to stop the humanitarian situation from further deteriorating is peace. The welcomed announcement, as I mentioned, by the governor of Ethiopia of a ceasefire must be the beginning of this peace for the sake of millions of innocent civilians. The conflict has already caused enormous suffering to the civilian population. It must stop now. The ceasefire has raised expectation among the population, And we now need to reach people throughout Tigray with humanitarian assistance to prevent a spread of famine and, as I mentioned before, an outbreak of cholera. But humanitarian assistance alone is not enough. We are not the solution. Unless civilians can return to normality and farmers can access their fields, famine will take an even tighter grip on Tigray. We welcome the government's announcement today of the formation of a high-level mechanism to solve access problems and challenges in real time, and we look forward to working together to make sure we immediately reach people. There can be no reason for the ceasefire to fail and humanitarian convoys to be blocked.
He also warned that 33,000 children are severely malnourished. The Ethiopian government, which has been fighting regional forces in Tigray, declared a unilateral ceasefire on Monday. Months of fightings have left the Tigray region devastated and will make it harder to get aid to those in need. The Tigray rebels, however, vowed to drive their enemies from the region, and there have been reports of sporadic clashes as pressure builds internationally for all sides in the conflict to pull back. The fighting between the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF) and the government forces has already left thousands of people dead and more than 2 million people have been displaced. All sides in the conflict have been accused of carrying out mass killings and human rights violations. Kamil Sadiq, CBA TV.